I think maternity leave is a difficult one. It's a space that we're not used to, and it's a space when, by the nature of what it is, you would have gone through a lot of changes, and you'll be going through a lot of changes, and it's hard, and there's a lot of sleeplessness. So personally, I'd say probably don't try and make any hardcore decisions on maternity leave in the first instance, and keep an open mind about things. But also, I think it is a good time to step back and think, what do I really want?
Let's face it, burnout amongst doctors is sky high, and we're actively seeking other ways to make the most of our transferable skills beyond the usual career pathways. Welcome to Disrupting Doctors' Careers. I'm your host, Dr. Abena Bubbs-Jones, and I'm on a mission to connect 1 million doctors across the world with the best in diverse career opportunities. Hello, welcome to Disrupting Doctors' Careers podcast. Today we are focusing on something that is very close to my heart. As a lot of you may know, I recently had baby number 2 4 months ago. And amazingly, I was invited to feature in the Mothers in Medicine podcast, which is hosted by Dr. Shola Akintade here. She's a neurology registrar and she's a host of the podcast. And so when I heard about it, I was like, wow, fascinating podcast. And one of the things that doesn't really get talked about much is mothers and their experience in medicine, but also mothers exploring alternative careers, especially when they have children as doctors. And I thought this was a great opportunity to have this discussion with Dr. Shola, who's got a lot of insights on that from her own experiences and that of the guests that she's spoken to. So welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So you've got some really interesting stories behind this journey to podcasting, but I'd love to hear a little bit more from you tell me a little bit about your medical career thus far.
Okay. Well, I think my medical career has been relatively straightforward. I studied at the University of Manchester. Actually, after doing biomedical sciences in Southampton, I then went to the University of Manchester. And then following on from that, went straight in and did my Foundation 1, Foundation 2. I was someone that, as I left medical school, I was quite clear in my mind that as much as I'd wanted to do medicine, as long as I can remember, that I didn't want to be limited by medicine. And it was really important that, this sounds a bit harsh, but I didn't want to sort of sell my soul to medicine. I didn't want to get caught in the rat race. So I kind of made that decision early on that if there were other things that I wanted to do in life, that it was going to be important for me to keep those still very much in my head.
Why was that important to you, Shola, in particular? Like, how did you consciously come to that conclusion? Because I didn't consciously come to that until later on.
Yeah.
So
I think I was someone that was quite reflective, and as we all do, like through medicine, I was, focused, I was ambitious, I was determined. As I left medical school, I already knew that I wanted to do neurology. I was already getting involved in research and trying to get my, those publications and all those things that you needed to do. And I felt like around me, there were a lot of people that were really pursuing careers, which is great, and professions. But I also recognized that there were a lot of other areas of life that were there to explore and that I wanted to get involved with whilst I was young. I think as a medic, it's not unusual to just be so focused in that one circle of life, but there's so many other circles of life. There's family, there's relationships, there's your other hobbies, the other things that you enjoy doing. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't get down the line and have any regrets. So I think that's kind of the outlook I had. So after my second year sort of F2, I took a year out. And at that point when I got married and then decided to go traveling. So I'd been to South Africa before during my elective, and I'd also spent time in Uganda, sort of working again in health. But I just wanted to spend a longer period away. So me and my husband went to a place called Manguzi in rural South Africa. And yeah, we worked there, and it was just an amazing experience and an amazing adventure. And I think those things can be so eye-opening. So we had an amazing time. I then came back, did my core medical training.
Okay, now let's go back to South Africa.
Okay. Yeah, I love South Africa too.
Yeah, obviously South Africa, very close to my own heart, having worked out there myself for a few years. A very long time ago. It feels like a very long time ago, and it is actually a long time ago, about 12 years ago, I think I was there. When were you there?
I think 2016. 2015, 2016.
Okay,
2016,
so a few years after me.
Yeah.
And your husband's a doctor as well?
Yeah.
And why South Africa? Just out of interest for you?
I don't know. I was drawn to South Africa for quite a few years. I was always quite keen to get South Africa. So when I had the opportunity to go abroad, that was just a place I looked at. And I think I wanted something different. I didn't want to go and see what I've been seeing around me.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to see something different. So yeah, I did spend some time in the city in Cape Town, but then I went into those rural areas, and it was just really refreshing, a really refreshing change, a really refreshing outlook on life, and just completely different perspective.
100%. I think that's the same reason why I decided to go to South Africa, because everyone was going to Australia, and I didn't feel it added too much, that much of a difference between the compared to the UK system. And I'd actually, the first time I went to South Africa was when I arrived there to work. So I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I knew it was different, and that's all I was after. So and I'd love to hear a little bit more about, were you consciously trying to do a lot of new and, I say, daring things in your career, in your life, before you were planning your family? Like, was that a consideration when you went out there, or
was I trying to do things that are a bit daring? I think I was trying to live life. I didn't want to get stuck in a box. I wanted to know that I feel like at every point in life, you want to feel like you've made the most of the opportunities. At that time, looking forward, I imagined and I hoped that one day I would have a family. And so it seemed like the perfect opportunity to go whilst you feel very free. And you can do those kind of spontaneous things. I don't know if I would drag my kids to South Africa now, although we have thought about it. But as just an amazing experience. But definitely then it just felt like there were more options. So it was just making the most of the opportunity, really.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because when I was out there, I didn't have any children, but I knew of some families, expat families, which had either started or grown in South Africa, because the quality of life, I think, particularly if you're kind of working in healthcare, can actually be pretty good, really. The cost of childcare is a lot less, and your kids are able to kind of go out and properly play in, especially we're talking about rural, but also in the cities. But there just seems to be a better quality of growing up. If that makes any sense. That's the impression that I got. Way more outdoorsy, way more country, that kind of stuff. So actually, similar to you, I was tempted to be like, I want to go to South Africa and raise my family. But I think because I've been away for too long, there's also this fear. Because remember, I went out as a trauma surgeon because of the trauma that's going on there. That hasn't changed that much from what I know. And then obviously there's a concern that could affect your family too.
Yeah.
So there's that. But moving forward, so when was your first child?
I had my first child between CMT1 and CMT2, so in between my core medical training.
Okay. And how did your career as a doctor change pre and post first baby?
Oh, it took a shaking. No, I think, as I said, like before having my first child, I was just very focused, very ambitious, wanting to get my teeth into projects and things, and just really focused in that area. And then after having children, I think it just changes everything, and your priorities completely change, and you're trying to balance that family life and work. And so it really did take a shaking. I had to kind of like shift my mindset, and recognize that I was in a different season, and the way I did things before weren't necessarily going to work now. So, I mean, after coming back from maternity leave, you just kind of plunge straight into it, but you're really not the same person like when you go back after maternity leave.
How long did you take off?
I think it took about 9-10 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you know when it was right to go back?
Well, it got a bit easier to make the decision when the money stopped coming in.
Financially driven.
But I think also, I don't know, I felt like I'd had enough time off. I knew I wasn't going to be someone that was going to stay at home and be a stay-at-home mum. I just didn't feel like that was going to be for me. I definitely needed a bit more, sort of stimulation work and things. But yeah, it seemed like the right decision. It was hard, but it felt right. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I reflect on my own time coming into motherhood later in life, I would say, my late 30s. And how my perspective on medicine or my career has changed too. And I'd say actually, it's interesting that you said what you said, because I feel actually even more driven and more focused than I did before I had children. And I know a lot of women or people say, oh, I'm doing it for my kids. I'm not doing this for my kids. I'm doing this for me, in the sense that I feel like, well, it's about time, and having children is a great reason to really push things forward. But I guess it's also about demonstrating what women can do in the world as a doctor, as a business owner. Yeah. So maybe setting an example in some ways. Yeah. I don't know. But as we talk about, there's always this mummy guilt. Which started, when did my mummy guilt start? I think the minute I had a child, I was God, because I'm still thinking about work, still slacking on the odd occasion. Slacking being an app, guys. It's a work communication app. And that's just continued on. But I'd love to find out more from you as to what led to you setting up this podcast in particular. So offline, I was talking about, podcasting as an alternative career. And you said to me, I don't really see it as an alternative career, and I'd love to explore that. But let's start with, what was the main reason for you to actually set up this podcast for Mothers in Medicine?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned life for me really changed as I became a mum and as I went back to work. I think I was quite naive going into motherhood. I really didn't expect how challenging it would be, from the pregnancy to the delivery, which the first one left me a little bit traumatized, I think. And the sleeplessness, going through maternity leave, walking around like you feel like you're in a haze, and then feeling like you kind of lost confidence. I mean, I didn't drive for quite a while after, because I was scared of having this baby in the back of my car and like driving, and then going back to work and feeling like you've forgotten everything. And then I was also trying to do my professional exams. We don't really have family support around us, so just trying to do so much. It was such a struggle. But also, you want to be this amazing mum, but you also have this vision of being this great doctor. And it was kind of like, how do I do those two? So I found myself asking repeatedly, how on earth am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to keep this house, look after my kids, be a good wife, and be the doctor that I'd been before? And I was just like torn. And I think eventually, like, I came to a point when I started looking around me and asking the same question. And, you know, you start speaking to friends and other people who are also kind of in that period of life and realize that lots of people are struggling. It is just hard. You know, part of me just wanted to go and find my mum and just be like, Mum, thank you so much for what you've been through. But so I think with that in mind, you know, I started speaking to friends, realized that they were going through a similar experience. And then I kind of started looking around for resources, advice, tips, somebody tell me I'm not alone in this feeling of overwhelm. And I didn't really find a huge amount, to be honest. And, you know, even at work, I recognized that I actually work in quite a male dominated environment, but there were a few women around, but everyone kind of just shows up. Everyone looks so together and just like it's easy. And I was walking into work with snot on my shoulder, you know, toys falling out of my bag. And so then I started to look for other women, other mothers who are doctors, and I started basically doing surveys and having like kind of like phone interviews, but talking to lots of mums who were doctors, and they were all saying the same thing. You know, they were all exhausted, they were all struggling with the mum guilt, they were all saying, you know, I feel so torn between being a mum and being a doctor. I feel like I can't give my best at work, and I feel like I can't do my best at home. And so I felt like I wanted to do something from there, and podcast seemed like, you know, something people can pick up and listen to on the way, like a busy mum can. And so I thought, you know, let's do this. And, you know, I met Anna, who I work with on the podcast, and yeah, we just started the podcast.
Brilliant. So I mean, this is really off the back of your own experience as a mother, but also genuine curiosity to find out how other mother doctors really do it. And the reality is there is a common theme that we're just you know, we're just juggling so many things, and there's no easy way, but we're somehow managing to get through. And as one of your speakers says, and it always rings in my ear, lower your standards.
Oh, I love that was such a revelation, and I was so grateful for someone just to say it. I was like, yeah, and you know, so many people said that in that first series. And that permission was it's been therapeutic for me, really.
Hugely so. And like, actually I tell my husband that, because he gets to be quite picky with the, I don't know, putting our daughter to sleep, and I'm like, listen, she's not asleep in half an hour, I move on. I'm not even to spend hours and hours doing it. But yeah, it is about kind of lowering your standards at home. At least you can only lower it to a certain level when it comes to clinical practice. Obviously.
I think it's also just kind of not expecting to do it all. You know, maybe you had a standard in work at a certain level, and just accepting that things are different, and you're not necessarily going to be able to do things in that same way. And if you had this expectation that as a mum that you were going to have this perfect house and produce these perfect meals, and you were going to do everything perfectly, you know, you just need to just lower that standard, because this is life.
Because obviously we see a lot of mothers in medicine who are leaving medicine because they realize it's very difficult to juggle all of that, and B, because the cost of childcare is more than the income they get from being a doctor some of the time. And so I guess my question for you is, what advice would you give to medical mothers who may be on like maternity leave as we speak, and they are concerned about the mummy guilt going back to work, but also worried about the income and kind of experiencing that kind of pull, you know what I mean, on both sides?
I think maternity leave is a difficult one. It's a space that we're not used to, and it's a space when, by the nature of what it is, you would have gone through a lot of changes, and you'll be going through a lot of changes, and it's hard, and there's a lot of sleeplessness. So personally, I'd say probably don't try and make any hardcore decisions on maternity leave in the first instance, and keep an open mind about things. But also, you know, I think it is a good time to step back and think, what do I really want? As I said, like, life has really changed, and it is an important time to step back and reassess and reprioritize and try and think what's going to work. You know, for some people, they might think, you know, I don't want to go back to work. For some people, they might need to reduce their hours. For some people, you know, they might want to go back to work sooner. I think you've just got to like reassess, prioritize, and then that really helps to set boundaries as a starting point for, you know, what to do next. But also then, as you go back, just remember, you can always reassess, you can always change things. You know, I've worked at 80%, I've worked at 70%, you know, and how can you juggle everything? It might mean that you do less projects, you do less of the things that you were pursuing before. It might mean that you have to outsource more. It might, you know, it's a good time to reassess and adjust.
I mean, for many mothers that I've spoken to as well, it's also a right time for pursuing alternative careers if this is a time where it just feels like medicine just isn't something you want to go back to. And that's 100% it's very common. It's not unusual to feel that way. And going back to your process in podcasting, a bit of the conversation we had earlier is podcasting a segue to an alternative career potentially for some mothers, or anyone, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still very early in my podcasting journey.
But from what you know, based on your experience thus far, or any research you did beforehand, or the technical skills you've developed, I'd love to hear a bit more about what you've learned in general through the process of podcasting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can definitely be an alternative career. It can be monetized in ways. It can be used to develop passion, and a different passion. It can be used to develop different skills. It can certainly open other doors. So I think there's lots of opportunities in podcasting. For me, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is it's really like a personal thing of just stepping out, taking a risk, finding your voice and not being afraid to use it. You know, I had this passion for mothers and seeing mums thrive and wanting to see them thrive at work, at home, and wanting them not to feel alone, and wanting them to know that, you know, we can support each other and encourage each other. I had a passion for that. But, you know, I found myself just kind of stood still with that, and then realizing, you know, what's stopping me? You've got this idea, what's stopping me? And I had to realize, oh, maybe it's just a fear, it's just an insecurity. And it got to a point when I was just like, well, you know, I might fail at this. It might come across a bit stupid. It might not work out, but I'm just going to step out and I'm going to try something new. And if it doesn't work, well, at least I tried. So that, to me, that's actually the biggest thing that I've learned personally. And then also meeting all these amazing women and seeing how the podcast has influenced other people and inspired other people, and getting messages saying, you know, I was in tears listening to the podcast. And I'm like, you know, I've had a few messages like that, and it's just really humbling, I think.
Yeah, no, I got emotional by listening to your podcast, but I think it is because you realize it validates your own experiences, because you wonder whether you're finding it hard because you're just not good enough. You know, I mean, as doctors, you know, that's something that I feel that is quite institutional, because we've been on the treadmill for so long, and our value is directly linked to whether we pass exams or whether we do our tick box and pass our ARCPs and get to the next stage, right? And so if we feel like we're struggling with being a mother, you know, then we're going to link it to, well, am I good enough? Why I've seen all these mothers who go off on mat leave and come back and they seem fine, and why aren't I fine? Like that I think that's the reality of it. And so listening to your podcasts and the conversations you had with other women, particularly the one that had 5 kids.
Oh,
like,
there've been a few
kids.
yeah, it's inspiring.
Impressive.
I think it's so nice to know how people are doing it, and that people are doing it. People have families. It's not a crime. It's an amazing thing. and it's been a really exciting process.
Awesome. So any final words for mothers who are exploring alternative careers or podcasting as an option?
Mothers who are exploring alternative careers, I would say, really, as medics, it is more to doctors. We're so used to being told what to do in a way, and at times we can become very institutionalized. We go to university, we go to year 1 to year 5, you do F1, F2, everything is so set, and we mustn't be afraid to just step out the box. In fact, there are no walls. There aren't a huge amount of rules. You can try something, it's okay, and just don't have any regrets. Don't have any regrets about it. If you try something, it doesn't work, what's the worst that could happen? So I just say go for it, really.
Yeah, I think my thoughts is having done it, but also seeing other women do it. If you are seriously considering of moving on from medicine or taking a longer break from medicine, I think mat leave is a good opportunity to explore a side hustle. And you never know what that could be. And the side hustle doesn't need to make money. It could just be your time doing something that fits in around the lifestyle or your lifestyle. I think that's another thing that I've learned from my having children, is that I've had to be really more focused around my time, and that what I do, it needs to fit around being a mother rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I feel so. Yeah.
But also boundary the time that I do have with my kids and with my work or anything else that I do. It's always a struggle, but it has really helped me in focusing on both better. That makes any sense.
I think podcasting definitely gives you a lot of it's a very really flexible. That's one of the things I really like about it. It's very flexible thing to do. I can do it in the evening when my kids are asleep or if they're at school. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Shola. And don't forget that she is the host of Mothers in Medicine podcast. It's an awesome podcast. And yes, it will bring you to tears, but it's definitely worth listening to because it has some really powerful stories from some amazing medical mothers and obviously Shola herself. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.